Hello, my friends. It is I, Rich Filiberto, DM Philly out here on the internet, your friendly neighborhood podcaster, back with you again and very excited to be unpacking the penultimate episode of House of the Dragon Season 2, The Red Sowing. I, of course, am not alone. I am joined by the protector of the podcast and the queen of the RSS feed, the one and only LaTonya Starks. LT, how are you?
I'm doing great. I am excited to be here to talk about something that I didn't even know was a thing until Sunday, the Red Sowing.
The Red Sowing, the sowing of the dragon seeds. It's been a very fascinating season of TV to talk about because I feel like there's so many of us out here, of the talking heads and the podcasters, the commentators, the pundits, as you will, taking the season apart. And we obviously have the book that a lot of us have read and some of us have not. And there's very minimal material in that book that we're adapting. So it's a really tricky thing to unpack this season of TV without alluding to some of the stuff from the books, because I think the show is telegraphing so many things very effectively. It's been like great foreshadowing all season. That said, how'd this land for you? What'd you think of the Red Sowing?
I mean, I'm on record as wanting a dragon.
Oh, I know
and so this is probably the only way that I would be able to get one. So I'm on board. Like I love the way the episode opened with just that like dragon standoff. That wasn't even really a standoff because Adam was like, I cannot stress to you enough, I do not have this dragon has me. And all the way to like, figuring out the lore of how everyone is related to each other, to actually like getting to the part where you claim a dragon is so cool. And the different things that the different dragons respond to is really funny, with Vermithor being like the Godzilla of all the dragons, just like, you woke me up and now I'm angry. And I'm only going to respond to someone who like yells at me and puts me in my place. To is it Silverwing?
Yep.
Just being like, oh, you're cute. I think I'll take you.
I love the whole vibe with the Silverwing, with the I can fix him energy of good old white Vermithor, like the ultimate bro of like, oh yeah, okay, you're bro worthy enough. Like we could saddle up. There's a lot to unpack. It's a really tremendous episode of TV. I think House of the Dragon's been threading the needle this season in a way that is just so satisfying to watch. I'm in deep kind of lamentation and denial that we only have one more episode left. Like really feeling that 8 episode runtime about now.
Yeah. I wish there were more episodes. The fact that there are only 8 and the 8th episode leaked again.
I know that'll happen out there.
Apparently that'll happen when HBO has the same security as does the Red Keep. So
HBO could use some new King's Guards, perhaps. I like that we're just keeping with tradition of the final episode of the Westerosi television show gets leaked out there on the internet. The internet is dark and full of spoilers, so tread lightly for those of you who want to avoid finale spoilers. It is out there in the ether. Folks are talking about it. I know TikTok has been a real minefield for people of stuff, scenes popping up in their feeds, so be forewarned. Before I forget, I'm just going to stop down off the top and say, if you are listening to us and you're not subscribed to the podcast feed, well, gosh, you should. I would appreciate it. You could subscribe to us wherever you're listening. Ratings and reviews on your podcast player of choice are appreciated. iTunes always really helps if you guys are hyping us up there for us to get discovered by new folks. This podcast, all the Acolyte Season 1 coverage that we did is over on our YouTube channel, Screen and Page over on YouTube, and at Screen Page Pod are all of our socials, Twitter, Instagram. Go give us a follow. You can find a link tree in the bio of both those socials that'll lead you to the Discord if you want to come hit me up and talk about any of your Westerosi deep cut theories that I am not addressing on this non-book spoiler podcast. Let's talk about it, LT. You note that first scene. This was electric. I mean, so much of the kind of critiques that got thrown at the later seasons of Game of Thrones where I cannot see what's happening. And so to see see even House of the Dragon season 1, we did that day for night shot out on the beach, I believe in the Driftmark episode. There was a lot of critiques about the grading, the color grading, and our ability to see what is on the screen. This was stunning. I mean, I've talked about it a lot. I'm a tried and true fantasy fiction fan. I've been reading all this nerdy stuff for the entirety of my life. I've been playing D&D since I was 9 years old. And this scene felt to me like I've been waiting 35 years to see on a television screen. It was stunning. These dragons were so magnificent as they're poised and posturing. We talked about it as this kind of Western standoff, like the two cowboys with their 6-shooters. I just love the energy here so much. And I am all in on Adam of Hall. I love Clinton Liberty in this role. He's so much fun.
He's amazing.
He really is.
And like just his whole vibe. It's so funny because Rhaenyra is angry and she is just like, who do you think you are? You stand before the Queen of the Seven Kingdoms with a dragon of House Targaryen. What do you want? And he's just like, I'm here to serve you, frankly. Can we talk about how that can happen? Do you know how to drive this thing? I very much am just along for the ride in so many ways. This dragon came to me.
I really love it. I know Sea Smoke is a very pretty dragon. I've had a couple of people in my DMs asking me about dragon lore. I know loyal listener Iron Steph, Sea Smoke is her favorite. She says it's the prettiest dragon. Do you have a dragon power ranking, LT? As somebody who wants a dragon, is there one at the particular top of your list right now?
Right now, Silverwing.
Yeah, it's a good looking dragon.
That's a really pretty color for a dragon. I love the like 5 o'clock shadow of Vermithor though. Like,
yeah,
I love that he has the horns that kind of look like a beard. So I mean, just like in terms of, you know, if the dragons were house cats, I think that I've probably owned a couple of Vermithors in my time. Just like old and grumpy and just like hungry. But yeah, Silverwing, I think, is probably the one that I would go for.
Silverwing looked gorgeous in like Ulf's mad flight over King's Landing at the end of the episode. That's another one where just the coloration, the individuality. I mean, I'm one who will critique bad VFX and CGI pretty often on these podcasts. And I think that the good CGI and visual effects are the ones that we don't necessarily see, that don't leap out to us. And I just have to applaud the team that works on this show because it was just spectacularly beautiful for the rendering of these imaginary creatures. So much of the detail work is exceptional. All the detail in the eyes, the kind of lip movements, the texturing of the skin, like it's so many little pieces that have to come together to make these things come to life the way that they do. But they've never felt more alive to me than in this episode. And certainly it starts in this kind of showdown on the beach. You note it, but Adam, Jon Snow, this guy is not. He immediately goes to a knee like, my queen, please teach me some Valyrian. I would fly with you. I just love the whole setup and the way that she's so taken in by this, the kind of way that that scene closes of the two of them having closed in with each other and kind of glancing out over the ocean as she talks about what this could mean and the hope that it has. And it's really notable that her dragon Syrax is here with her ex-husband's dragon in Sea Smoke, and that they have their own relationship. The characterization of the dragons, like there could be more there, but I really love what we're getting so far.
I love what we get. I love that it seems like Syrax and Sea Smoke are having a conversation of their own.
Oh yeah.
I would like to have the subtitles for the dragons, honestly. Like,
for real.
That would be pretty great.
There's so much to the sound design too. Like Syrax has these very particular kind of like purring, cooing sounds. And I do love that the idea that they're having a conversation like, yo, who's this guy? What happened to our guy? You know? And Sea Smoke, like, listen, our guy's been gone for a long time. Like I'm lonely out here. I'm lonely on these beaches. It's nothing but me and the salt and the fish, you know? It just awesome.
And Sea Smoke's like, doesn't he remind you of Laenor though? Just like a little bit. Can't you see it? I really, it's just a breathtaking scene. It's so gorgeously shot, and the idea that, you know, there's a whole layer to this where like these dragons aren't real. And when they shoot it, like they're very much just some guys in like green suits that are there. But the way that they're able to layer everything and texture everything onto the screen really makes it seem real, and you really immediately buy into this universe where this is possible and these dragons are real.
Too true. It's a little John Lovitz acting. They really are good. They're able to capture such kind of gravity in these scenes with these creatures that are not present, and I just love what they've managed to pull off. So Rhaenyra gives them the whole thing. I'm glad of it. I'm glad about this. They're going to head back. We cut over to the Red Keep. So here is Alicent talking to Master Orr while she's getting bandaged up. This cut that she received on her arm, which is the exact mirror to the cut that she put on Rhaenyra back in season 1, in the penultimate episode of that season, I believe. And she's talking about how she spent her life in service to her family, to the crown, and none of it matters. LT, they end up cast aside or hated. This whole idea that nothing is clean here in King's Landing. We're back to our season 1 shots of the rats kind of scurrying around in the floor, and this is going to precipitate this whole arc of Alicent that we get this episode, wherein she's headed out to the wilderness. She's going to find Sir Rickard Thorne of the King's Guard, and she's going to go on this camping trip. How do you feel about all this Alicent stuff this week?
Honestly, it felt like a different show whenever we got anything with Alicent. Alicent's scenes felt very much like the beginning of a horror movie in the woods.
Oh gosh, right.
Where you're just getting all the establishing shots of where all the terror is going to go down. But really, it's just like a depressed woman escaping into nature because she doesn't know what else to do with herself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting how the show parallels the character of Alicent with the character of Rhaenyra. You know, they have these like matching cuts on their arms. They have even had a relationship with the same man. And, you know, they have very much gone through different trials where they found themselves just kind of like almost escaping into nature, like Rhaenyra in early season 2, where she's just taken to wing and looking for her son and her son's body at this point and his dragon. And now Alicent with this, where we're just getting all of these different nature tableaus. And we very much get the idea that Alicent is about to take her own life, which is, you know, not a place that we've ever seen this character before.
No, absolutely not. I mean, that's certainly part of the implication when she's talking to Sir Rickard about, I don't know if I intend on returning. Olivia Cook had said a little bit about it this week in some interviews and some bits here and there that I got, where she talked about the cut specifically being the impetus as she's sitting there talking to Orwyle, and she's looking at this wound that exactly mirrors the one that she gave to Rhaenyra, and that symbolically it acts as this kind of catalyst for her to realize the futility of this cycle, that even after all of this time, after all of the effort, after all of the kind of sacrifice that she has given of herself, of her desires, of the life that she might have had, if not for her duty to her family and her obligation to her father and her father's wishes, that ultimately it leads her in the same place, that they have kind of gained no ground, that we're almost even moving backwards, and that this really illuminates to Alicent the futility of all of it. I mean, we go back to some of the conversation as Rhaenyra had come to her at the end of season 1 and was talking about this notion that you aspire to receive the respect of these men, but in reality, all you're kind of doing is making a bigger window in your prison cell, right? Like you're trapped, and that finally kind of the reality of it all crashing into her. It's tragic, and it really is such a wonderful depiction of this very complex, flawed woman that we have a lot of reasons to dislike and a ton of reasons to empathize with.
Yeah, this episode does a really good job of making us empathize with Alicent, and then later making us empathize with Aegon.
Oh yeah,
which are things that at the beginning of the season I never would have thought, you know. that I would do. But here I am, just like admiring how beautiful Alicent is, just kind of stripped down, with the backdrop of nothing but nature, and the Kingswood being so beautiful in and of itself. But then looking at, like the lone protector that she takes with her, and the look on his face every time he has an interaction with her is just like, oh no.
Yeah, it's really sad because I think that part of what we've been talking about and the sound design in that small council episode, I think at 5, of her kind of everything drowning out around her while the men all continue talking and overlooking her. This woman is entirely alone. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, Otto was almost like her closest ally, Kristen afterwards, but neither of these men really have her interests at heart. They're both kind of
Mm-hmm.
just using her as a piece in their own games and for their own machinations. And she's just so like desperate for any kind of connection that she's having this conversation with Orwell of all people, who already has kind of shown his loyalty is certainly not with her. It felt really powerful. I don't know how much you track on Shakespeare, but I saw a lot of comparisons to Alison and Ophelia this
Yeah.
week out of Hamlet. And Ophelia, this kind of like quintessential female character that is manipulated by the men all around her, much to the end at her own demise. And I am no scholar of Hamlet in that way, but it tracks for sure. I've read enough about Ophelia to be like, yep, totally. And I see where you're talking about. It really did stylistically feel like a different show. And it reminded me a little bit of Rhaenyra being in the Kingswood of the last place we were here, when she goes on the hunt in season 1 and sees the white stag with Kristen Cole, which is this divine sign of her kind of right to rule that I think it becomes very important the further we dig into this one. Um, so Laris and Ironrod, this was like another just electric scene. Ironrod, pretty minor player in the small council to this point, but Laris is somebody who is so interesting every time they come forward. And so we get this really interesting scene of the two of them overlooking the courtyard. Aemond in the backdrop is sending off Aegon's Kingsbros to the wall for their failure to protect his family
Yeah.
ultimately. And it's so kind of wonderful that this is all just happening in the backdrop. And if you're paying attention, you realize the context. But this whole conversation between Laris and Ironrod's got a whisper. And ultimately, Laris like, well, that's your whisper. You do with it what you want. Where'd you hear it? Oh, you heard it from a squire, heard it from a stable hand, you heard it from his father, the fisherman, who heard it from another one of his shipmates. Yeah, that's all you, bro. You do whatever you want with that. How'd you read this whole interaction between these two players in the game?
Yeah, I felt like, I mean, Laris is clearly on the side of Aegon, because Aegon is the one that, especially in the position that he's in now, that he can most easily control. It's been proven that Aemon doesn't think that Laris should even be there. Like he seems to like question what his purpose even is, and doesn't want to bring him in any closer. And Laris has very much always been playing his cards pretty close to the vest, but we do know that he seeks power, and he's tried to latch on to different members of the Hightower family in order to do that. And so the person that he probably feels he can have the most influence over is Aegon. So he doesn't want Aemon to have any more information than he necessarily needs.
I read it the same way. I mean, this feels very much to me in the same way that I think part of what we got in episode 4 is Aemon responding to Aegon's treatment when they meet each other at the brothel. Laris is directly reacting to his kind of humiliation in the council chambers last week, and this concerted effort. Like, yeah, sure, it's a thin whisper, but we have to imagine that in the job of the master of whispers, like all information is valuable, right? We
Right.
run it through the lens of perspective. We take it with the appropriate grains of salt that it's through so many players in the telephone here. But at the end of the day, the choice to not give Eamon this information is a very important choice. And I love the way it's going to set up Laris for as we find him later. All of the framing of that scene is like electric too, of the two of them just from behind as they're looking down at these much more powerful people, at the prince with the biggest dragon, and he's so dangerous and he's the center of all this energy. But the reality is that he is not the end all be all making decisions here. It takes a lot of people to kind of administrate the kingdom, and that if he doesn't have his small council working towards his own ends, what does that mean for Aemon Targaryen's future? That feels like a very bad place to be as the prince regent, as it were. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, we also see that Aemon doesn't exactly have any friends.
No, he does not.
Like he's good at a lot of things, but like making friends and like endearing people to him is not what he's good at. And so that includes all of the people of his small council as well. I think he's one of those people who would much rather rule by fear than, you know, by endearing people to himself.
I think it's really well said. I mean, I think part of when we reflect on what we know of Aemond back in season 1, this is like the youngest son of the king and the least important guy. Like, he was not somebody clearly that got a lot of love from his mom or his dad, for that matter. He didn't get a lot of love from his siblings. We look at his friends, like, what are the closest relationships he has? Helena, who we, you know, he at least is kind to her and she seems kind to him. But that whole paradigm has shifted given what happened in episode 4. And then we saw him with Mistress Sylvie in the brothel, who was somebody that at least seemed to show him some affection, even if it was paid for. And very notably, Mistress Sylvie making maneuvers for Team Black at this point after that whole kind of fallout in the brothel that we got. So his isolation and the way that it mirrors Allison's, like, I'm right there with you. I think it's really insightful to hone in on it. Just to stay with Laris, because we get this other really important scene with him later with Aegon. He's going to come into Master Orwyle, who's walking Aegon around the room. A brilliant decision to kind of cut to Aegon after we see old decrepit Viserys in the dreams again.
Yeah.
The mirroring of father to son, LT. Like, it's so wonderful.
Yeah, it is really exciting to see each week how the makeup changes when with Aegon kind of like healing. But you know, he still like was set on fire essentially, you know, and he was in like Valyrian steel armor, which doesn't melt, but it just gets hot and kind of like cooks whomever is inside of it, which is wild and weird to think about. But I also think that they're doing, like, the actor who plays Aegon is doing a really good job just like getting across the pain and like exhaustion that comes with serious physical therapy and like trying to rehab yourself and like learn how to walk again.
Oh yeah.
Like it is yet another scene where I'm feeling bad for Aegon, a character I really do not like. And this show does that really well. But it's also really interesting to see Laris take, you know, what has been his shame his entire life, his disability, and reach for power through that, like through knowing what it's like to go through having a disability and like having to learn to walk and like having to lean on someone else to figure out how to do that. He's puppeteering a king, which is just like a really interesting character note.
It's incredible. I mean, it goes all the way back to the Tyrion and Jon in season 1, cripples, bastards, and broken things. Like, make it your armor, make it your strength. We see it reflected on the other side in Rhaenyra. Let us raise an army of bastards then, after a lifetime of these kind of insults that we've taken. And I love that. Part of what's so wonderful about this dynamic, we know Larys is a grasper, that he reaches for power, that he's nefarious to the extent that he will burn his own family to get it, right? This man is unscrupulous and ruthless in his pursuit of that power. But there's also, I think, I read real empathy in this relationship and in the way that he is coming to the king. This is a piece of strength that he can find from the weakness that he's had his whole life. To your point, he can use it as leverage. He can use it as a rung in that ladder of chaos to climb. But I do sense this real empathy in the interaction with him. And maybe that's just the good acting. I mean, this is all like very subject to interpretation, but the whole note that he has that he's saying to Orwell, like Orwell's like, you're pushing him too much. This kid needs to rest. He's spent. And Laris saying he will have no time for rest. Like rest will not come. The kingdom is in peril. His brother is maneuvering against him. There is so much unsaid in that line. And as much as Laris's own interest is sort of tied up in Aegon's, feels like a big gamble for him to make. This is not the sure bet for a safe better. And I can't help but feel like part of it is motivated by I see part of myself in this man, and I would rather he in power than his grasping brother.
Yeah, I think that is accurate. I really do think that Laris kind of goes for like the lowest hanging fruit.
For sure. Yeah.
And he has been able to find and exploit in each of these people, like Allison included, something about themselves that they didn't like or were uncomfortable with. And so he sees that kind of writ large with Aegon, and also sees a little something of himself. And he's the only person in the Red Keep that's not going to coddle him, which is something that's very new for any of these characters, I think. So I'm really interested to see and excited to see where this whole thing is going to go.
Yeah, it's that whole notion of like the not coddling, right? That I think I'm really gravitating to most. This idea that everybody else is trying to like be kind and supportive and empathetic and give you space and what you need. But I know what you need, and what you need is to get strong as quickly as possible, right? Like none of this is actually going to serve you in the long term if your long-term plan is to survive. And in that way, I just really love it. It's such a great and unique kind of depiction that deepens what we got in the text in the most satisfying of ways. We'll shift back to Dragonstone in a second, but let's just talk about crazy Uncle Damon and his fever dreams out in Harrenhal, as we really stepped it up a notch this week. My man, the little Lord Savage, Oscar Tully himself, showing up with his bannermen to get everybody in line, following in the tried and true tradition of savage children in Westeros, like the great Lyanna Mormont who rode before him, lest we forget. This kid was fantastic, LT. Everything about this was like electric, from Simon Strong and his gorgeous robes to like the crazy tracking shot coming up from under the Godswood to George Martin's face on the weirwood tree. There's just so much to love about all of this, man.
It's all so good. Just the idea that this child who a few episodes ago was so bumbling and didn't really know his place, has emerged after his grandfather's death and is able to humble, like truly publicly humble, one of the great Targaryens. It's so cool to see Daemon just, his face drop when he realizes that he has to make amends to all of these river folk by, killing the person that he sent to do all of the terrible deeds in the first place. I just love this scene so much because is it Oscar?
Yes.
Okay. Because Oscar is just like, do you want our army or not? And Daemon really can't say anything. I mean, like this is by far the most humble we have ever seen Daemon Targaryen.
I really, really love it. There's so much about it that feels Game of Thronesian in the ways that I like. I think House of the Dragon really threading the needle for some great TV, but there are elements of Game of Thrones that I miss in terms of the world being a little bit bigger, meeting a wider cast of characters beyond our nobles, the travel, those early seasons of Game of Thrones, we were in so many kind of different regional locales. So I really love getting out of the castles to the Alicent scenes, feeling like a different show. Just being out here, the importance of kind of the weirwood and the old gods and the old magic alongside everything. I love that. And then the tradition of it all. I mean, I think the scene is very important to some of what Rhaenyra is going to be talking about for us to unpack, but um, Damon gets it that he kind of has to let this kid flagellate him and beat him around like a little dragon pinata so that he can have some standing amongst his own bannermen, so that those leaders in turn can look at this child like, oh yeah, he's got a backbone in there. He may be a Tully, he may be named after a Muppet, but we're going to follow him to war. Let's roll, this character in the books is definitely Elmo Tully, and I cannot help but like the pivot is just to make him like a little bit harder, like just that little bit harder of like, no, he's Oscar. I just, everything about this is tremendous. And it's really notable, but I think it's easy for us to lose track. This guy, Willem Blackwood, he's going to have himself decapitated by Damon by the end of it. This is the same kid that fought for Rhaenyra's honor. This is little Mike Bloom, who fights a duel to the death in season 1 at Harrenhal. That like, we loved this kid. You know what I mean? And it's such another small piece, but the people that he killed, the Blackwoods and the Brackens, are in this eternal war. And so the leader of the like Brackens that he killed is also named Willem. Like literally these guys have the same name, but they have this kind of like centuries old hate that they can't find the origin of. Everything here was great. The way it kind of hits Damon that he's not a leader. He's not good at leading men outside of combat, and that this is not his forte. And it sets him up for this last dream with Viserys as he's going to kind of stumble back into the castle after the lords do swear their swords to his cause. Everything about Oscar's speech, though, is tremendous. And I just really loved it. It felt like such an epic moment in a fantasy series.
It really was an epic moment because, we talk about, and we will talk about, all of the power of these dragons, like, that are considered gods essentially. But Caraxes has been with Daemon this entire time. He even took Caraxes to kind of like threaten the people in the Riverlands to like, to his side, and it had no effect. Like they were like, we choose fire then. Fine. Like it's really just kind of like Daemon has been humbled in a way that we've never seen on this show, and his dragon has had no impact at all.
None.
He's just kind of been sitting around waiting for Daemon to stop having dreams in this haunted castle.
To the dreams, we get this final return of King Viserys, fully rotten, head melted, and he's just talking about how he never wanted to rule, that the weight of the crown is crushing, it crushes all who wear it. You always wanted it, though. You always wanted it, brother. So, I've seen a lot of people with varying mileage on, we spent all season doing nothing with Daemon Targaryen, one too many dreams. This could have all been a lot faster. All of this was kind of already articulated over the last couple of weeks, but I really felt like this is a definitive turning point for him, like the 1-2 punch of having to sublimate himself before this child, of having to like proverbially bend the knee to the river lords to kind of gain their service back, into this final haunting dream. Like we've turned a corner. I feel like wacky zany Uncle Damon is like fully Team Black at this point. LT, am I like being optimistic on my Damon read here? And also I would wonder, like, how did this work for you as we seem to be at the end of Damon's crazy fugue dreams?
Yeah, I do agree that maybe it was a couple dreams too many. I could have done with this revelation an episode or two ago.
Mhm.
Just because I don't know, there was something so cool about season one, parts of season one, Damon.
Mhm.
Like not the part where he was, like grooming his teenage like several teenage wives. Um but or like killing that one. Like she was the one that should have come back to haunt him.
Yeah, too true, very true. But I mean, he is a very compelling character. There's a reason
Yeah.
that he comes out of season one as this fan favorite because he really is infinitely interesting.
But ultimately, I think if this what it takes for him to set aside all designs on the crown and to fully support Rhaenyra, then I'm glad that we got there. I just wish that we had gotten there sooner.
Me too. Looking at the book again, we're really adapting such a small piece of writing, and we're doing so much. The showrunners have done such a great job at creating intention because the book is written from this very factual recounting, and it is a distorted factual recounting. It's very important to recognize that the book's being written by maesters who are all men, and that there is an overt agenda to the men who are recounting this history and are trying to kind of continue to promote the standard, the status quo in the realm at the point in time that it's written. So much of what the show is doing is creating the intention and the motivation behind the characters that lead to these big defining moments of history that we get. So that being said, I think there's a way to like restructure the season a little bit that like Damon with Rhaenyra like getting more and more wound up until he leaves early in the season probably would have been more satisfying. Like I feel like a lot of folks don't even really remember why he left. And like while Rhaenyra is kind of like dealing with all of the desperate maneuvering to come up with some extra dragons, this guy's just sitting in a castle with Tez for the last like 2 months, just in his fever dreams. So I appreciate the folks that are a little bit frustrated by the amount of time it took to get here. I feel pretty satisfied by the end of it. And I really love getting to see Viserys back all distorted as he was.
Yeah. I think that uh it was Patty whose idea it was to put he said, I'll come back, but you have to put me in like the decrepit Viserys makeup.
I heard the same, and it's so good.
Yeah.
It's such commitment. Yeah.
Yeah. The actors have really good ideas on this show.
Indeed, they do. This is a very invested ensemble. I like
Yeah.
these folks. I like these folks. So to Dragonstone, this is like the heart of our action all episode. The council gets word of Adam, this new dragon rider. Corlys is going to find out. There's the whole thing of like, oh, he's a thief. He stole this Targaryen dragon. All of the quiet, silent acting between Jace and Bela back and forth in that chamber. I love how it's kind of setting up his conflict about where this plan has gone. And we see that Rhaenyra is like, no, she's not coming to the small council meeting. She's in her private council with the White Worm Lady Missaria as they're going to unpack all of this. This is the beginning of Rhaenyra saying to Missaria, what if it was ordained by the gods? Sea Smoke chose him. And the whole kind of revelation that Missaria is going to give. This is an explicit quote from the books that's attributed to Mushroom the Fool. We have to look under the sheets and in the wood piles, wherever you Targaryens spill your silver seed. That's where we'll find them, your grace. But she knows like at least 40 of bastards in King's Landing. These Targaryens been getting busy in King's Landing, LT. I love the whole setup of this, of Missaria kind of saying to her, the order of things has changed. Why not embrace it? And Rhaenyra is articulating so much of what we saw in the Riverlands, this notion that there's this ancient honor to the noble houses. And it's not for Rhaenyra. I think it's much more pragmatic than prejudiced in the way that it is with Jace, where she understands that there is this fealty, this commitment that goes back generations. These noble houses have names that are important to them, and that is a motivation to keep them in line. They have something to lose, and that is part of why they make these oaths to kings and swear fealty. So she's a little bit afraid of what this could mean, but Missaria sells her pretty good, and they're going to build an army of bastards.
I love the conclusion that Rhaenyra comes to of building the army of bastards. I do think that, you know, demystifying the whole Targaryen hold on dragons is something that I could understand, you know, Rhaenyra being hesitant to do, because she's grown up her entire life thinking that she was special and that Targaryens are special because they're the only ones who can bond with these beasts and like turn them to heel. But what happens? I mean, you know, she asked Adam his parentage before she asked his name.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, she's so interested to know like who among you, your people, would like entitle you to ride a dragon. And there is something about the message that it sends in terms of like democratizing the idea of dragon riding, that even the small folk could do it. And I know we get that scene with Jace later that we'll talk about.
Yeah. The Jace scene is interesting. I mean, again, whenever we're talking about when we're doing the fantasy thing in the modern day, it's always a really tough sell when we're trying to root for the noble aristocrats who have this privilege of birth over the common folk, right? In the modern day, we're all the common folk. So few of us are that like 1% that control 90% of the wealth in this world that it's hard to relate to this idea. But I do think that part of Rhaenyra's reluctance to go ahead with this plan is coming from this pragmatic worldview of I can count on the nobles to adhere to their own self-interest, but these random people that are going to pop up and be dragon riders, like I have no kind of tie to their fealty. Yeah, it's great that Adam wants to bend the knee now, but what if he doesn't choose? And so this is going to take us to Jace later, and Jace articulates such a profound pain that is so kind of relatable to me. My whole life, I've had to grow up with this bastardized heritage. I'm not stupid. I know the truth of it. Did you never consider when you went to bed with Harwin Strong what your children might look like, what this mean for us? Of course you didn't. That's not at all what you were thinking about. But I have spent my whole life burdened by this. And now the only piece of legitimacy that I have to kind of defend my right to this claim that you've made that I am your heir, when you are gone and no longer here to defend me, you're going to give it to anybody? And it's so complicated by the notion that Jace opened this can of worms to begin with.
Yeah. The whole time I was like, Jace, this was your idea. Like, what are you talking about? But it's all rooted in his insecurity.
Of course.
That he has had to face these, you know, pressures of being a strong bastard for his whole life. And, you know, the only thing that he had was a dragon, but that's not the only thing he has. It doesn't matter who your father is. Your mother is the rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms.
Mm-hmm.
So you're legitimate in every way when it comes to that, you know?
It's really fascinating. You know, I mean, again, when we go to the text, there was this whole notion of exceptionalism that King Jaehaerys, the old king, gets the kind of faith to adopt, that the Targaryens stand apart. And a huge part of this is obviously, look, the Targaryens ride dragons. Like part of Jaehaerys's move with the exceptionalism thing is like, he and his wife fly Vermithor and Silverwing to Old Town and are like, oh, so priests, you know, hello, Pope, these are our dragons. So we're going to need you to shore up the doctrine a little bit. And there is that very real notion that Jaehaerys, the old king, never had to really, he did once or twice with Vermithor, and we'll talk about it later, but he never had to ride to like these big open wars because he knew how to use the dragons to intimidate people, to get them to do what he wanted in the end. And part of this notion of the Targaryen exceptionalism is rooted in the notion, it's right out of the text. One need only look at them to see how they are different from common men. They have this silver hair. In the books, it's a very big deal that they have purple eyes, which is a thing that we just didn't want to do with contacts from like season 1 of Game of Thrones, right? But this physical characteristic being so kind of different and stands out. And it really, you know, it always stood to me as something in Martin's text that is so entrenched in our real world bigotry and prejudice in terms
Yeah.
of like sexism and all of it, that it is this inverted kind of prejudice that, oh no, look, these people look different from us, therefore they must be better than us, they must be elevated above us, right? And the ways that the systems of power and the systemic organization that we've developed for this kingdom just holds true to that and allow kind of no chinks in that philosophy. And between like we're bringing dead dragons into King's Landing and we're going to rally up a bunch of randos to ride them now, it's the beginning of these pieces of the system kind of falling away in a really interesting way.
Yeah, and so interesting that, you know, that this is the beginning of the end of the Targaryens,
Oh
really,
yeah, yep.
as well. I mean, the beginning of the end kind of happened, you know, when there was the division, like when Aegon took the throne.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, it can't help to get rid of all of the things that make a Targaryen look legitimate along with that. You know, to parade a dragon head through the streets of through the streets, and for people to be like, I thought the dragons were gods,
Mm-hmm.
and to realize that they're not. You know, so what does that mean for the Targaryens themselves? If the dragons aren't gods, then maybe they're not either.
It's really interesting, and I kind of love where we got to it. So before we dig into the specifics, just to the dragon seeds, Missaria knows at least 4 score. We're gonna get this awesome, like the second Mission Impossible sequence of season 2 of like Adam's got the boats and we've got the handmaids of Missaria, and Rhaenyra's lady is in King's Landing spying, and we gotta get to the brothels, and Ulf's boys are gonna shame him into being a dragon rider, and Hugh's wife is just like, please don't do it. But all of that stuff is very cool. But I just want to ask you before we even get to it, did this feel insane to you that Missaria is like, oh yeah, I got 50 of them at least, don't worry about it? Did this feel like too many Targaryen bastards?
It felt like a lot. It also felt really weird that you would just see a lot of silver-haired people walking toward boats and not do anything about it if you were the Greens. I mean, again, you know, you're paying your guards and they're not really loyal to you. They're loyal to themselves. So that has a lot to do with it, because one of the gold cloaks is even helping to facilitate all of this. But you would really think that if a bunch of people were that with silver hair were going in the direction of Dragonstone, that somebody would notice. Similarly, you would think that if a woman walking around in a very distinctive red cloak was just like spreading the word throughout all of the small folk, that someone would notice that too.
The red cloak sent me, LT. I'm like, are we doing Schindler's List? What is going on here? Oh my God. Can we make her more obvious? Like, please, could she have a sign that says Team Black as she walks through the city? It really cracked me up. Part of, again, the thing with the text is that there are other silver-haired people, but they don't have the same kind of features of the Targaryens. They don't have the purple eyes. They certainly don't have the dragons. But Martin writes a lot about the Lyseni, the people from Lys having silver hair, and so there's a little more ambiguity there. There's also this notion of the first night. It's very much prima nocte, this like former right of like the royalty and the nobles to like take a person's wife to bed on the night of their wedding. Very like Braveheart. If we can't get them out, we'll breed them out. It was an old like tradition amongst the monarchy. It was a practice that was upheld through King Jacaerys, or Jaehaerys rather, and his wife found out about it and kind of shuts it down. But there's this whole notion that up until about 50 years ago, this was very common, that people were very aware of the Targaryen bastards, that sometimes when somebody gave birth to a Targaryen bastard, they would get gifts and be thought of as like a blessed child in that way. So generationally, it's kind of new that they're falling into the woodwork in the way that they are, that they're not as overtly identified. But it's such a great setup. And the way that we get these 3 different dragon riders in Adam, in Hugh, and in Ulf. I love the stuff with Hugh and want to stop down for a bit. So we learn that his daughter did not survive. His wife kind of pleading with him, don't do this. And he's going to give this little bit of his lineage and his history, where he talks about how his mother worked in a pleasure house. She was afforded more accommodations because she was silver haired, and that she talked about he was just the same as her brother's boys, Viserys and Daemon. So in the Targaryen heritage, the old king Jaehaerys, who we keep talking about in Alysanne, Jaehaerys rode Vermithor. His sister wife, Alysanne, rode Silverwing. These dragons hatched in their cribs. They were the old king and the old queen. These dragons are very old. They're the closest that we get to kind of Vagar sized in that way. They had a lot of kids, LT. They had, I think, 12 children, most of whom did not live to their adult lives. And that's why his grandson ends up on the throne and none of Jaehaerys' sons. But he had one particular daughter, Sarah Targaryen, who's a real wild child. She's making all kinds of trouble in King's Landing. And ultimately, she runs off. And there's a whole kind of story about her and this like little empire that she sets up in the East. She becomes like the queen of these kind of pleasure houses that she establishes. So this is pretty explicit confirmation for the book readers that Hugh is Sarah Targaryen's daughter. Very interesting. I love this kind of nerdy stuff, but I thought they did a really great job for a new viewer of being like, oh yeah, he's Daemon's half brother.
Yeah. Well, cousin, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I know how families work. I've been way too involved in this Targaryen family tree, and I'm like, cousin is your half brother, isn't it? Is that not?
Yeah, exactly. My uncle, who is my husband.
Yeah.
Yeah. So weird. It's still so weird. Like that Jaehaerys and Alysanne were brother and sister.
Oh yeah.
I don't.
There's a really great story there. I love the story of Jaehaerys and Alysanne because they like really loved each other in this great way. Like it's pretty rare amongst a lot of the Targaryens. They had a very kind of like fraught rise to power. But yeah, this was the whole notion that this whole doctrine of exceptionalism, it specifically gets adopted by the ideology of the Seven because Jaehaerys married his sister, and it was a major problem. Everybody was kind of afraid that this was going to start a major conflict between the faith and the monarchy, and they fly their dragons down and are like, it's not a problem, right? While the dragons like sit on the walls fanning their wings like, we got no problems, right? And so he resolves all the problems, but it's a very interesting setup. I just love the notion of Hugh's wife like, please, you don't need to do this to prove yourself to me. We can go find a new life. We can figure it out. And Hugh, like, no, I want my life to mean something. I need to be able to protect you in the way that I couldn't protect our daughter. And that motivated him. Whereas then we get to Ulf the Sot and his bros like shaming him into this whole process. I love it so much. LT, did this land for you?
It did, because Ulf was thinking to himself, do I even know if what I've been saying is the truth? I don't.
It's so good.
And now you're sending me to go claim a dragon? I'm good. Like, I could just continue to drink off of these people by telling them that I'm a Targaryen bastard. I don't need to actually be one. Like, no one needs to do this like proving ground thing. It does play really well for me. And the fact that he is so pitiful and is essentially chosen for being pitiful is hilarious.
It's wonderfully compelling. Tom Bennett's the name of the actor. There was a little bit of him in the after the scenes. He did an interview with Joanna Robinson this week, and he's so charming and funny, but he made this really great observation that immediately came crashing into me. Like, yes, that's true. Where he's like, Ulf is one of the few people on this show that smiles. Ulf is having a good time. And I think that goes such a long way. Like, I miss our Davises and our Tyrion Lannisters and some of the kind of lighter characters that we had in Game of Thrones. Everybody in House of the Dragon, like, why so serious, man? You know, other than Simon Strong, these people do not seem to be enjoying their lives very much. But I love Ulf the Sot, just like getting him in the mix here. What a just ridiculous dragon rider. So over the top.
Yeah.
I didn't talk about it. Corlys going to Adam. Really great little moment of this kind of acknowledgement. I like how they just put Adam in a room and were like, bro, just stay here. We'll be back in a little bit. Like, don't break anything, you know? Like, Corlys comes in and just gives him the like, good job.
Good job.
Attaboy. Was that enough there? Would you have liked to see more there?
I would always love to see more Corlys. I would always love to see more between, you know, a father who has abandoned his kids and finally realizes that, you know, he has no choice but to raise them up. I know, I mean, Alan comes out and says that he is, you know, of the sea. And Bela told him a couple episodes ago when he tried to make her his heir that she was blood and fire, and that Driftmark needs to pass to Salton Sea. So that's all really interesting to me. It's very reminiscent to me of the dad who only shows up to take graduation pictures.
Yeah, for real.
After just like not being there for his kids for their entire life, which is something that I have personal experience with. So I feel like this is a story that I can see myself in quite a bit.
Yeah, totally tracks. I mean, Corlys on the edge of his midlife crisis. It's coming a little late, but we got it a couple episodes ago. He's like, I've spent my whole life pursuing this career. Like, oh, I've like misprioritized. I feel you there. The stuff with Alan, I really liked as he's going to send Alan off. I need somebody we can trust. It's very on the nose as he's going to ultimately like spit Rhaena's words back. I am of salt and sea. I yearn for nothing else. This notion that my brother was ever restless, yearning for some sign of his worth. I really love that too. The kind of dynamic between these two brothers. Alan looks shocked when Corlys tells him, like, oh yeah, it's your brother, bro. It's totally your brother. A little bit of like canon explanation that I don't think we needed, because I know a lot of the fans are like, I don't understand. The Valyrians are not dragon riders. Corlys says it, and he notes, I never knew about your mother's heritage. So the idea that their mother might have been one of these Targaryen dragon seeds
but
is
like
interesting.
In the book, isn't it true that even though they weren't dragon riders, they intermarried with Targaryens a lot, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're the Valyrians. They're literally one of the only families that came from old Valyria, but they never had dragon riders is a big deal. And the intermarriage, there's a bit of it, but it really becomes much more common in this era. There's like a couple of like Valyrians that get married in the Targaryen line before this. But it always has been like a little bit of a point of like a question. And I think it drives at this issue that we're going to get to in the episode, that like we don't really know why the dragons choose this stuff. We don't know if it's actually about Targaryen blood at all. There's also this whole notion that gets complicated with Sea Smoke of a dragon choosing a new rider while their rider is still alive. I was looking for some like exceptions in the histories, and there's one like very specific moment where Rhaena Targaryen has her two daughters switched, but they didn't have dragons before they got switched. Anyway, it was
a
like
different Rhaena Targaryen.
Yes, an entirely different Rhaena Targaryen. Yeah, there's a lot of them. It's really, it's an interesting point. And I think for like the Westerosi nerds who love the like minutia of the dragon lore, it's another like piece of information that we can put on our database of what's going on here. But I kind of think that the point is that we just don't know. And I think like there's glory in not knowing. It's part of what the fun of it all is. You know, Rhaena, but we get the one little scene as the procession is ultimately leaving the Eyrie, and Rhaena, she's going to slip off into the countryside after those sheep bones, LT. I love it. Love to see it.
Yeah. Not a big fan of Jane. She sucks. Glad that we don't have to deal with her anymore.
Apparently she does. In the power ranking of mother and father from Raised by Wolves, like, yes, father, like climbing the charts on House of the Dragon, mother plummeting even further. I didn't really get the mean mugging. She seemed like so mad to watch them go. So here's part of my question, which I've heard a couple of people talking to you about, because I'm not sure where I land on this. Is she like quietly encouraging Rhaena to go try to tame the wild dragon? Is this like a How to Train Your Dragon sequel here? Or is she more just like, I can't believe you sent me these baby dragonlings.
Yeah.
Get the hell out of my castle.
I think it's the latter.
Okay.
Unless she is encouraging Rhaena to go off to her death, which I could also see her do, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that fits the latter. I've seen a lot of people speculating of is this like your like, stand up and earn it moment? Is she a little bit like, if you come back with a dragon, then you're welcome to stay with your little nephews for as long as you like. But I kind of just read it as her being pissed off that Rhaenyra like did her dirty and like kind of made this maneuver, right?
That's how I read it too.
Okay. So to the actual seeds, we get the whole like returning. They're all rounded up in the room. Rainier is going to kind of roll in with them. She walks amongst them, which is a pretty powerful moment, I think, when we're considering like, the episode 2 of the season was Rainier the Cruel. We just grabbed 50 random people from King's Landing and brought them back here. I was thinking a lot about Dune Part 1 and Lady Jessica and like the handmaidens and somebody being in here with a knife, but like I love it as she walks amongst this army of bastards that she's starting to assemble, and she begins with this crazy kind of speech that she had. But before she even can, the Dragon Riders are going on strike, LT. They're not having it as they're like reading her for filth in Old Valyrian. The dragons are sacred. They're the last magic of Old Valyria in this sad world. They are not the playthings of some men. We're out of here. I did not see this coming at all. This was incredible.
No, but it is wild to witness it happen. And we kind of get the answer to what happened to those guys right there, where they can't believe what they're seeing, and it goes against everything that their order was established to do, and they just kind of walk off the job.
I think it speaks to Jace's fears, right? I mean, Jace gives voice to all of these concerns, and then immediately the most true believers in the Targaryen exceptionalism walk. These absolute kind of like radicals of the faith, if we were to look at it as a religion in that way, are like, are you kidding me? Like, you could sell us on Stefan Darkland because you had his pedigree paperwork. We got his AKC like breeding records, but this is crazy. We are not doing this at all. We're out of here. And that feels emblematic of where we're going. But also, I think it's just a wonderful storytelling choice to leave them a little bit more ill-equipped for all of this. We don't have the experts in the room. Rainier has got to kind of lead them through this ceremony, and it leads to some of the chaos. But this speech that she gives as she walks down amongst the people, I used to think I knew what it was to claim a dragon. I understand now what I thought I knew was ash in the wind. Perhaps blood or worth, or perhaps something else. Each of you has left behind a life to answer this call, a life to which you might never return. If you survive, you will be transformed. No man or woman can face a dragon and be otherwise. Some of you may welcome the prospect of change, even death, given the alternative. Privation, starvation, war. This is our purpose, to end those hardships for you, for your kin, for all the realm. With these 2 dragons added to our number, the enemy will have no choice but to give way, and peace will be restored. Suffering will be ended without bloodshed. LT. This is a hell of a speech, but it feels like it's missing a lot of instructional information for this mass of people.
Yeah, there really is nothing that she tells them, not even a couple words in High Valyrian. There's not. She literally just says, "May the odds be ever in your favor," and marches them toward one of the oldest dragons that exists. And she speaks some really great Valyrian. Like,
oh yeah,
that was great. Like, the way that she called him and he just kind of emerges from the dark and we don't really even see him at first.
It's such
So
a
cool.
tremendous moment. And we get the mirroring of like that stunning poster shot from season
Yeah.
one of little Millie Alcox with the dragon binder. It's a staggering scene. I mean, again, when I just talk about the VFX, I think everything from this point forward is it's jaw-droppingly good. It really is astonishingly good for somebody that watches a lot of big special effects genre stuff on TV. This just it's flawless. There's very little that you could pick nits at in terms of what they pulled off. The way that she delivers to them as they're about to leave the room, too. The dragon is named Vermithor, the largest in the world after Vagar, perhaps the most fierce. It's called the Bronze Fury. We'll go to him now. And she starts walking and then she stops and hesitates for half a step and turns back to them and she notes, and may the gods bless you. It's really this afterthought as she realizes the carnage she's about to kind of unleash these people on. We bring them down. She calls Vermithor out. So it begins. And as she goes up to the balcony, the fire starts spewing. People start dying in mass. There's this one stunning shot very quickly of a guy in Vermithor's mouth. And he gets like kind of crushed and he falls out. He's dragging himself along the pillar. And she's watching him and she looks away, and it's this long lingering shot on Rhaenyra, LT, where we see her kind of like working through it, and she turns to look back as he breathes fire on this broken man dragging himself back while her guards hold them all in. And it's a very different look that she turns back to take in the scene with. This feels like a very definitive transition for Rhaenyra's entire kind of worldview. We go back to the like her giving the prophecy to Jace, and part of what she's saying is, I never told you this before because I didn't really believe it myself. And these signs, one after another, of I tried to get Darkland mounted, it failed, but here comes a dragon rider to meet me on the beach, and he bends his knee immediately. I need more of these people, and here is my hand, who I might have killed, but happens to be my closest confidant, and she's got 50 of them that she could bring me. And now here I come down in without the dragon trainers in this moment that I could fail disastrously as I call Vermithor, and he answers. And it is this divine mandate like falling over her, this whole prophecy that Viserys gave her, really like it's like she believes it for the first time in this moment, and it's scary. LT, I just love it so much.
It is a little scary. It's the way that she commands the word when she says Dohaeris to him, that is like a fury that we've never really seen in Rhaenyra before. And he comes to heal, and she's able to touch him, like if just for a moment, and it seems to relax him a little bit. But then, you know, he realizes that he's got some food there that he can play with for a little while. It really is. She is just leading all of these people to their death.
Yeah. The guards holding everybody in the room,
Yeah.
like that's where it really gets brutal. I saw a lot of people like, wait, are they? And it's like, yes, they are. Could there have been a different way to do this? Maybe if the dragon trainers were still here, this would not have been the plan. But I think that everything goes down so quickly, and she's so caught up in the moment that she's like, F it, we ball. Let's bring them down there and see what happens, right? And the way that it leads of like the water, the long shot with Hugh once we get down into the pit, this is like staggering. They go through it in the after the episode,
Yeah.
some of the effects, but it was just so well done. And watching him like leap into this moment of heroism, only to have Vermithor like see him like, oh, okay, I like what you're putting down here. I like this energy.
Yeah. Who knew that you just have to yell at a dragon and they just completely fall for you? That's all that you need to do.
On the flip side of the coin, Ulf the Sot just literally steps in shit and falls on his ass. You know, it really is like so funny. He did not break any of the eggs. The eggs are in these little like magma incubators, right? We saw Damon break into them, but it's very funny. I saw some like analysis of the way Damon is so methodical and precise, the ritual of removing the eggs. And then here comes this Targaryen bastard down here that literally just steps in it and breaks it open. Of like the metaphor for what this means to the dynasty, I think is fully on display. But I
Yeah.
love the Silver Ring energy of like, I can fix him, you know. Like, look at this pathetic little thing. She's nesting, LT. She's about to have some
Yeah.
babies, and she's like, look at this incompetent baby man human. Yes, I like it.
And
It's
she just
mine.
nudges him a couple times. And it's his, you know, essentially saying, okay, you can kill me. I'll just lay here and let you, like, just him submitting
Mhm.
that she's like, okay, you'll do. Like, what? I don't know. I really, part of me wishes that there was something that we were able to go on that told us like why the dragons were picking these people.
Mhm.
But part of it is just so chaotic that it's just fun to watch.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was it was very fun to watch. My the great like love of my life texted me on Sunday night, like, well, that was pure nightmare fuel. I'm gonna be glad to try to sleep on that tonight. You know, like the mass is burning. But again, this is for me as a lifelong fan of fantasy. Like, my God, I feel like I've waited my whole life to see this done so well and realized so well on screen, you know. Ulf's going to take his mad flight over King's Landing. Silverwing looking much more blue than I expected, but I'm
Yeah.
here for it. I really loved it. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous kind of coloration. The way that it's going to set up Aemon One Eye to just lose his ish as he sees this dragon over the city. The moment of recognition between Iron Rod and Laris of like, uh-oh, whoops. Eamon like charging out. I saw people like, I love that Vagar is like parked out behind the Red Keep like an old Chevy, you know, like just too good. And Eamon like ready for war until he gets halfway across the bay and is like, oh, wait, is that a giant pile of dragons with my aunt waiting for me on the castle? Let's get out of here. Turn around, be gone. It's a wonderful way to kind of end the episode.
It is. It's the first time we kind of see fear in Aemond as well, which is great. The, I I just love that Vagar is always down for war crimes, just like
Yes.
at all times. Vagar is like, all right, who are we going to kill now? And the other thing that's hilarious is along with the silver hair, the Targaryens must have evolved like really great vision. Cause how does he see her?
It's a very
How?
it's a very good point. It's a very
It's in the same way, like how did Bela see Kristen Cole and
it's a
Gwaine?
very, very good point. They have extraordinary dragon sight from the back of their dragons, right? They're really able to laser in. The thing that I really love about Vagar, the more that we're seeing these other dragons, Vagar has the 1,000-year-old grandmother look of like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, you're so old and decrepit and like
She's
kind
got
of
the waddle.
terrifying. Yeah, exactly. You whole neck, you have way too much skin, and it all seems like very like wrinkly and thin in all the wrong ways. It's just like Vagar gets grosser and grosser to me the more like pretty dragons we meet, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
just so sent by it. I'm all in on Vermithor. I love a bronze dragon in my D&D campaigns. I love the Bronze Fury. Again, Vermithor and Silverwing were hatched with Queen Jaehaerys and his sister and wife, Alysanne. They were put in their cradles by their older sister, Rhaena Targaryen, the other Rhaena Targaryen, who was like a real baller and is attributed to starting this tradition of putting eggs in the nest with babies. So they've only ever known one rider. They're roughly the same age and they're quite big. They're both about 100 years old. So while they're not Vagar aged, the two of them together are like a huge step up from Cyrax, even
Mm-hmm.
from Caraxes in that way. So this is like a really big game changer for Rhaenyra. I love where it leaves us off. I'm really sad we only have one more episode to unpack, but gosh, I'm excited to go watch it as soon as we're done recording this podcast.
Yeah. Have you found it already?
No, I have not. I have not. I am not near the pirate that Corus Valerian is. I am no crab feeder out here in the high seas searching for it. But we'll see if I can't find it.
Same. I just don't know if I'm going to be able to make it to Sunday.
Oh, I know I can. As a absolute glutton for punishment, perhaps a bit of a masochist. I talked about I had COVID a couple of weeks ago. We missed the episode 5 week. I accidentally started rewatching Game of Thrones. Now I'm rereading it, and I'm just like, why? Why am I doing this to myself? Why, George Martin? Damn you! You've got me right where you want me, right in your crosshairs. You've sucked me back in. There's something about the world building that he does in Westeros that I just find so compelling. And as a person who works in this space on my own right, I just the guy's really good at lining the pieces up in ways that fit together satisfyingly but are also eternally frustrating. Yep.
And so much happens with the characters. They go to so many different places that you go back and you're like, oh, I forgot that happened. So it's almost like watching it again for the first time.
It truly, truly is. Exceptional episode. Certainly my favorite of the season thus far. Any closing thoughts before we part ways this week, LT?
I'm really interested to see how Aemond is going to be totally normal and chill and not react to this in any way.
Oh, yeah, me too. Aemond One Eye, the even-keeled prince, as we know him. We will be back in 1 week's time unpacking the finale of House of the Dragon Season 2. Until then, where can people find you, LT? What do you got going on?
I was able to somehow brave a podcast right after watching the most recent episode. I went to talk to Chappelle and Mari on Recap Kickback about this very same episode. So you can catch my coverage there of that. And then Chappelle and I also sat down to talk about Simone Biles Rising, which is the Simone Biles documentary that has its first 2 episodes on Netflix. And of course, the U.S. women just captured gold in the Olympics. Yay, our country for the first time ever. I get so patriotic during the Olympics. Any other time, I'm just like, it's a little too much American flag for me. But during the Olympics, yeah. So yeah, check us out. Check me out over there, and then follow me on Twitter at LK Starks to see where I'm going to go next, and follow me on Instagram at Stormborn1222. I spent a couple weeks in Cambridge and took a lot of pictures, so they're up on Instagram.
Awesome. Go give her a follow, both those places, so you could keep up with everything that LT's doing. I'm psyched to go listen to Recap Kickback. Those guys have been having fun all season. I got swept up in the Olympics too. Pommel horse guy, he's got me just like George R.R. Martin. I love him. Pommel horse guy.
Steven!
Champion.
Love him so much.
Pommel horse guy, first of his name. Batman, the Caped Crusader. It's going to be a new animated series on Batman, The Dark Knight, dropping its full 10 episodes in a binge this weekend over on Amazon Prime. Expect some coverage from that coming pretty soon. Kevin and I are going to be getting together to talk about that. Probably some Deadpool coverage coming your way too. I did go and see it, and I've got a couple of plans in the works to break that down. We may be doing a little bit more House of the Dragon coverage as we are closing into the finale and postseason, so keep your eyes open for that. Cobra Kai season 6 part 1 dropped over on Netflix a couple of weeks ago. I got together with Jason Reed and Marissa Garza to break that down, so in case you have gotten caught up on all of the excitement in the dojo, that is hanging out in the feed waiting for you. And there is a Wheel of Time book club coming, I promise. The Eye of the World part 2, reading up through chapter 17, will be out this week. Thank you all for joining us. We will be back in 1 week's time. We shall not gainsay the gift the gods have given us in House of the Dragon Season 2.